Alright guys, it is getting close to late February. I think Florida's going to be in here pretty soon. Mississippi's coming up. That'll be the first state I hunt this year. But I figured I actually had I spoke at a seminar the other day. I was asked to do a seminar on turkey hunting. Basically a seminar on it, and did a PowerPoint presentation. I figured it would be beneficial and helpful to some of y'all out there to cover some of these things. Turkey season's almost here, springtime. A lot of us, this is our favorite time to be in the woods. So I figured I would cover 6 key factors to being a more proficient turkey hunter. You know, I've been turkey hunting this is going to be my 26th season. I have failed a lot, and I've spent a lot of time in the woods. So the more you fail, the more you can learn. I'm still learning something new and taking away something every single year. So I figured I'd dive into this. Let's just get right into it. I will be throwing some slides up on the screen and be coming back and forth to me periodically there. So I'm not really putting all these in a specific order of like importance. I think if you take away a few of these from the rest of the group, you're just not going to be as proficient. So I think they're all equally very important. I think these first 3 things would probably be the most important if I had to put a weight on it. But the first thing is woodsmanship. So woodsmanship, what is woodsmanship? It's the ability to move throughout the woods undetected, quietly, put yourself in a favorable setup, being in tune with the turkey's habitat. What types of areas do they like to hang out at certain times of the day? Different weather conditions. I would say you could throw all those categories into woodsmanship. You know, topography wise, I'm going to be looking for any kind of rise that I can use to my advantage. In flatter ground, you're just basically looking for some obstruction that you can put in between you and the turkey. Turkeys have an exceptional ability to see. That's probably no new news to any of y'all, but really respecting a turkey's eyesight will definitely help your woodsmanship if you think that way. The next thing would be the setup. So the setup is crucial. You can be a champion level caller. You can have some decent woodsmanship to be able to get around, but if you continually and repetitively pick unfavorable setups, I'm not saying you can't be successful, but the level of success that you have probably isn't going to be that great. So I'm going to go over several of the most common setups that we encounter in the spring woods here, but the general practice here is that we always want that turkey to be killable when he first makes his appearance. The last 6 years I've bow hunted turkeys without a blind and lugging around the cameras. Any of y'all that follow my channel know that. That adds a different level of a problem there. I do not hunt turkeys the same way as far as the setup goes because of that factor. Meaning, I normally would set up real close to the crest of that ridge because I have to have, you know, with a shotgun, I want that turkey to pop his head over that hill and I'll be able to shoot that turkey. The way I hunt now, it requires a decoy most of the time. So if I put that decoy right out in front of me, right at the crest of that ridge, a lot of times what happens is it spooks that turkey. I have to wait around for a long time to get the right shot. So that's just not conducive to that style of hunting. The same thing with like a road setup that we're going to cover here in a minute. He comes around a bend in the road and sees that decoy, he might put on the brakes. In my opinion, a decoy, it can help you, but it also can hurt you and be more of a hindrance to your success, especially if you're using a shotgun. With the bow, this style of hunting that I do, it's kind of like a, I guess it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's say you could call it a necessary evil. I hate lugging them around, but it's just the nature, you know, of what I have to pay to hunt and all that type of style. I am planning on utilizing more of the action cameras and the GoPros and stuff like that, but the problem with that is the footage quality is not really what I would like it to be. But anyhow, just a little background on the setup. I've already covered, you know, most of that right there. Generally, I think what kills probably a lot of people's success and what hampered a lot of my success early on was that I was not decisive enough. So you have a window when you need to think quickly, act decisively and get to a certain spot. And sometimes that window is very small. Having the ability to know when it's time to be very decisive and aggressive and when it's time to be patient and let a situation play out is a big key in the setup. But right now, I guess we'll shoot on over to the most common setups. So the first one would be a crest of a hill. So if you look at this slide right here, you'll see, pardon my emojis here, but I was just trying to come up with something to show a general principle here. At the bottom of this hill right here, you'll see from the bottom to the very top of that crest, let's just suppose that's 120 yards or so, or 100 yards for that matter. Well, the very top illustration would be a lot better situation. That's going to put the hunter right when that turkey crests that hill. It's going to give the hunter a shot right there. If you look at the bottom scenario down here, it puts the hunter all the way at the bottom. Maybe he didn't act as decisively and as quick as he should have, and he only has a certain amount of time to set up. That can cost you. What happens is that turkey, he comes up to the top, he should be able to see the source of that sound, and you're way down there at the bottom, especially when he's above you. A lot of people say that a turkey, you can't call a turkey down a hill. I have done it, others have done it, but there's a reason. It's not that you can't, it's just that it doesn't happen that often, because you got to think that turkey's above you, so his perception is very good at looking down. If he's above you, he has a better position. He should be able to see the source of that sound. If you're above that turkey and he's down below, now the perception has changed. Now he doesn't have as good of a perception going uphill. People have said they like to be able to jump off of, it's easier to pitch off of a hill or something like that and fly away. That's definitely true. Is it the reason why you should always be above them? I'm not quite sure. In my opinion, I believe it's more important for the depth perception factor. The ability for him to come find the source of that sound is very important. And that would be the crest of a hill. The next slide here would be a thicket setup. A thicket setup is doing three things basically. It's making him find the source of that sound, it's putting obstruction in between you and that turkey, and it's creating some kind of inquiry and mystery about where that hen actually is. If you look at the slides here, or the illustration to the left, that's more of a favorable spot. If I can find a blowdown, briar thicket, anything like that is going to be, I'm going to try to position and get on the edge or get in that before I start working that turkey. If you look at to the right here, this is a illustration here, pardon the emojis, but you've got your hunter out here to the left, open woods out here, here comes the turkey, and let's just say for all intents and purposes, in both of these illustrations, the hunter is positioned and the thicket is positioned 100 yards from that turkey. That gobbler's a lot more likely to come closer if you're set up in that thicket with that visual obstruction than he would be if you're out there tucked on next to a log or something and that's all you had and you're in the middle of open hardwoods or a swamp or something like that. So we'll go ahead to the next setup illustration here, which would be probably the one that people deal with the most, which would be off of the roost. How do you approach a turkey off the roost? Personally, if you look at the slide right here, you'll see an illustration to the left is more of my style. Traditionally, now I'm saying dating back to when I was hunting with a shotgun, to the right would be not how I would set up. Each row of trees here is 20 yards. That would put the hunter on the right illustration, meaning the one with the red X, what I wouldn't do traditionally. That would put him 140 to maybe 160 yards from that gobbling turkey. I like to be closer for several reasons. If I'm hunting public land, that's another hunter is giving him a window around me to cut that turkey off. Secondly, I've had hens walk by me where I could barely see my hand going to the gobbler. This is kind of common knowledge, but the main kind of way turkey hunting works is that hen calls, that turkey gobbles, and that hen goes to that gobbler. So if I'm set up somewhere, I want to be tight enough to him to, you hear a lot of people talk about, and I talk about a good bit in my videos, getting in his kitchen. There's something different about making contact with a turkey that is closer to you as opposed to way far off. you're a lot better apt to be in the game with that turkey the closer you're set up. Is it foolproof? Absolutely not. You know, you can have turkeys fly way off away from you. You can have them fly way down in a valley or something crazy. But generally, sometimes they'll pitch right off the ledge there because that's kind of the position they took off to roost the night before. But I actually also have had turkeys pitch off and land 500 yards away in a valley. So always and never do not really apply to turkey hunting. We can make general, you know, we can base our judgment on general principles, and that's really the way I like to do, through experience and time in the woods and learning through failure. These are general things that I hold true to. You know, if you look back at this slide right here, you know, with a bow without a blind and a decoy, I may want to not set as close, but not always. Another key factor, if you look at this slide, there's a point there, limiting the gobbling. Why do you want to limit the amount of gobbling? Now, this is not always a tried and true case, but in general, I do like to start every turkey the same, but I never finish every turkey the same. That's getting into another ball of wax that we'll cover in a second. But the more that turkey gobbles, the more he's attracting other hunters, and the next thing is the more he's calling up other hens. So that's just more things to go wrong. Now, if the situation warrants that I get aggressive with that turkey and get excited with that turkey, that goes into a whole nother ball of wax that we're not going to get into in this video. We'll have to dive into that another day. But yeah, you could challenge some other hens in there, drop a buddy back. You could call way back here, not say a word, scratching the leaves, make your way up closer to your setup. It really just depends. And I think too, a lot of times what happens is, you know, I did this when I was 10, 11, 12. When I first started turkey hunting, we love to hear that turkey's vocalization. We love to hear that gobbler gobble. But I got to where I was going turkey hunting literally just to go out there and hear a bunch of turkeys gobble. But I was not killing those turkeys. When I started calling less and being more patient, and just that basic principle is when I started to have a little bit of success at an early age there. So I think we've covered pretty much off the roost. I'm sure I could get into more on that, but the basic principle is you want to be the first thing he hears, the first option off the limb. You don't want him to gobble as much. You want to read his demeanor. When he answers you, you want to be able to communicate with him. You need to be able to pull different calling scenarios out your hat, given whatever he's telling you to do. So the next setup would be a road setup. You'll see this a lot of times, farm country, planted pines in the south. You have fire breaks, logging roads, hunting club roads, things of that nature. If you look at this slide right here, you'll see on the screen, there's an illustration to the right, which would actually be what I would do with a bow and arrow, no blind, and a decoy to get a visual. That's kind of the setup I would actually go to. The traditional approach, no decoy, I want to be, you know, having that gobbler come investigate the sound of that call. I'm going to set up, if you look at the illustration to the left with the check mark, I want to be on the left side of that road, right around the bend. I want him to come around that road to investigate the sound. Are they always going to do that? Not exactly, but for the most part, generally, they're going to come down that road. I want to be on the left side of that road around the bend as opposed to the right. I want him to try to look and have a hard time finding the source of that sound as much as possible. Now, can you call a turkey way down a straight road and be tucked off to the side? Absolutely. You can without a decoy. I've done it before, but are you going to encounter more problems there? Definitely. So I guess we've covered the road setup. We will go to the next setup. And I'm trying not to talk too fast here, but it's a lot of material that I kind of want to get through without boring y'all all day long. So the next setup you'll see on the screen here on the slide that'll pop up here in just a minute is going to be a field / clear cut or cut over scenarios. You know, basically a clear cut where there's no obstructions all the way across it. Field, typically this could be a field that has, you know, winter wheat planted in it. It could be a field that's just been plowed. It could be a field that's just been planted or something like that. I'm talking about openings, clear cuts, and fields. How do we attack that kind of scenario without a decoy to be efficient? Like I said before, I think hunting without a decoy, when you understand a lot of principles, will make you more effective of a hunter as opposed to hunting with a shotgun and a decoy. You have a point and shoot weapon, you're able to take that turkey as soon as he appears if you put yourself in the right favorable setup. But if you look at the slide here on the field setup, we're going to dive into it. Scouting is going to tell you what area of the field the gobbler prefers. You know, what does that mean? So you're going to be able to look at that field, watch that field beforehand if possible. You're going to be able to walk that field, get familiarized with it. Where do the turkeys typically come out in the field? Why is that? Where's the strut sign located? Are there a bunch of different farm roads that enter and come out into the field at the same spot or the same general spot? Which way is the sun setting? Which way is the sun rising? All those things play a big factor. When you happen to watch turkeys before the season or something on a field near where you hunt, pay attention to those things. And the reason why, a lot of times a gobbler, and turkeys in general, are going to want to come out on a field if it's not flat. They're going to want to come out in an area where there's a topographical change, a topo line that comes out in the field. If you look at the slide there, we'll get into this in just a second, and I'll have an illustration showing kind of that. Generally, high points in the field get a lot of activity with gobblers. It's a place where, you know, just the same thing as those topo lines. I've found over the years they tend to work those lines because, number one, they're up top. One side of the line, they can see a long way. They can see over the other side of the line. They're safe there. They're more audible there. They can be seen from hens there. So that's kind of where I've seen a lot of times a consistent theme with gobblers using those topo lines, using those high points in the field. From a hunting aspect, that's a way to take advantage of that. It could also be, going back to this slide, there's a nest in this illustration, you know, for a reason. Later on in the season, when hens are nesting, I found a lot of times she's nesting off of a field in a thicket. There's a thicker area around the field in one particular spot. I might find where there's hens that tend to use one particular area more so than not. That's naturally going to attract, you know, gobblers. I would tell anybody a set of binoculars is key. If you don't have a good set of binoculars, get a set. I don't have any affiliation with any binocular or optics companies, but I like the Vortex Diamondbacks. They're pretty affordable and they do a pretty good job. Take advantage of trees in hill country or flatland stuff. I tend to climb trees a lot of times to get a visual, just kind of trying to take his temperature and his demeanor from afar, looking at his non-verbal communications and his verbal communications, trying to kind of play that turkey and, you know, try to figure out, what is that turkey telling me? Okay, what do I need to do next? Kind of see which direction a turkey might be going. The next slide on field turkeys, and if you see right here in the illustration to your right, there's an onyx illustration there. What am I looking at? Kind of already covered the rise in the field or the topo line. Coves in a field, it's a good thing to take advantage of. If you look at this illustration again, you'll see several scenarios here that I'll kind of play out. The binocular icon is actually a hunt I have where I climbed a pecan tree, saw a gobbler around this corner of this field. I moved to the bottom left around in this illustration and swung down the edge of the field, put that little peninsula in between me and that turkey, called to that turkey, and set up right there. Ended up, turkey went around that cove, almost like a bend in the road setup, but in a field, and I shot him right there. So that's another situation. It's best to think about, you know, is the grass really tall in certain spots in the field, and is it shorter in other spots in the field? A turkey's going to want to be able to see around him, and he's going to want to be able to have a gobbler's going to want to be able to have other turkeys see him. Another strategy here, if you look back at this illustration, you could see, you know, a spot. A lot of times the back of that field, I came around the rise, climbed a tree, saw two gobblers out in that field, got back down, found the thickest stuff I could find inside the woods instead of right on the edge of the field there. Found a thicket, put me and my dad right in there, found us a little clump, probably 60 yards inside, tucked inside the edge of that field. called to those turkeys, worked them, and they came to investigate and came all the way out of the field and into the woods. Dad shot that turkey. A lot of that has to do with when to call, you know, when not to call, what to say, how to say it, how to communicate with the turkey. And that's actually something we're going to get into here in just a minute. I think we've covered field turkeys pretty well. There's a lot to cover with field turkeys, but I think for the most part we've covered, you know, the general principles there and some things that, you know, maybe you have thought about, maybe you haven't. So the next thing, key factor to being a proficient turkey hunter would be calling. A lot of people might say calling, you know, it's not that important. I think it actually is important because calling does a few things. Being able to be an effective caller and, you know all the vocalizations, how to make them, be proficient at making them, sounding realistic with them, adding other ad-lib or realistic, you know, measures to your calling definitely makes a difference. Exceptional callers are going to be able to strike other turkeys that maybe someone else wouldn't have been able to strike. If you look at the slide there, I would say a proficient turkey caller would be able to make all the vocalizations of the wild turkey with a mouth call. Most of the general ones, definitely. You get into pot calls, box calls, trumpets, wing bones, scratch boxes. Your vocalizations might be a little bit more limited in that factor, but being a proficient turkey caller, someone should be able to pick up any of those calls and produce turkey sounds that sound realistic. It has to do with somebody in the hunt in that moment being able to paint the picture with different scenarios, which is kind of segueing into another video for another day. Being able to challenge hens, being able to paint a picture of a jake with hens to elicit that territorial response, being able to jake, yelp, or calk. Kind of it all comes down to that is really flock dynamics. If you have a place that has a crap ton of jakes and jakes are beating up gobblers, might not be something you really want to do. Me not understanding flock dynamics actually last year cost me a setup on a turkey one time. I didn't hunt that area. I was first time there, so that's probably a question I should have asked the buddy that I was hunting with. But basically it's your ability to paint the picture and mimic with realism certain different scenarios, knowing when to pull those out your hat, knowing when to call, knowing when to shut it down. I think those are the main points when it comes to, you know, calling as far as it being, you know, a factor to consider in being a more proficient turkey hunter. Our next slide, obviously I've already talked about this somewhat. If you look at that slide, realism kills turkeys. So realism, I would describe realism as ability to match tone, cadence, vocalizations, rhythms. I've already talked about certain things you can do, like scratching in the leaves, walking slowly, scratching as you're walking to your setup. It could be raising a wing on a tree way up high and just scratching on the bark like a hen repositioning on the limb. Kind of brings me back to a hunt I had one time. It was a hunting club. Realism might be this. It might be kind of having to do with your setup. I went to a spot that was heavily pressured hunting club. Everybody had been after this one particular turkey, myself included. Kind of think about the definition of insanity as doing the same thing, expecting a different result. That's what I was doing. I was kind of coming at a turkey from the same area just because it was hard to get around on the turkey and set up from a different position. Most other guys were coming at the turkey from the same spot. I was changing a little bit, but not really enough. That particular day, I went way around, got way around this turkey and let it start to crack. I raised up high on this post oak, slapped that wing like I flew down, and then I walked and scratched my approach towards him from the backside. Just a little at a time, putting structure in between me and that turkey. And I sat down to that turkey maybe 60 yards, I want to say, 70 yards. Actually had a buddy with me. Did not even call to the turkey. That was all I did. And that buddy missed that turkey, and it was a good one. So that's just another example of painting realism. It may mean sounding just like a turkey. It may mean not even calling at all, but just acting like a turkey. So this next slide we've already kind of talked about as far as calling, but just to cover some other things here, and I think I've hit on some of these things throughout these other slides, but you know, knowing what to say, what vocalization to use, when to use it, and how to use it is key to, calling and turkey hunting. That could be when to be aggressive, excited, when to play it slow, and be soft. The ability to read a gobbler's demeanor, being able to communicate, being able to look at his body language and know kind of which direction you need to go. It could be when his snoot comes up or when his snoot comes down. I could think of one thing I definitely look at. I like to look at a turkey and I like to call to him. People call it calling to a turkey, making contact with a turkey, but I will make sure his head's down normally when I engage him. If I can see him from afar, if I'm climbed up in a tree and it's a field setup or something like that type of scenario, I'm looking at that turkey. I'm going to wait till his head's down. I'm going to make contact with him, call to him. He's going to throw his head up. I'm going to wait every time. If I call to him, I'm going to wait till his head's down. And then if he starts to come, he'll act like he's coming, I'm not going to say anything. And I'm going to pay attention to how many times does that turkey act like he doesn't care, but then he's going about his business, and then all of a sudden that head picks up. That head keeps coming up, and it keeps coming up more consistently, and it's happening a lot. I know that I don't need to say anything. I've already sparked that turkey's curiosity and his interest. So that kind of it goes back to every situation is going to be different. You can start turkeys the same way generally, but how you finish turkeys from one turkey to the next is totally going to be different most of the time. There's general ideas and principles we can start with, but it's not going to always be exactly the same every single time. So this is a good time to segue into the next slide here on calling, which would be the ability to paint the picture. What does that kind of mean? Well, if you look at the slide right here, you'll see there is two different illustrations here. One of them is kind of how I approach turkeys from a distance. The other one would be how generally someone would do it that would, in my opinion, would not be the way I would do it. If you look back at this illustration here, the guy on the bottom, he fires up the turkey, calls real loud, real aggressive, 500 yards, and the next time he calls to the turkey, he's 100 yards from him. In my opinion, that puts you scrambling for a tree, for the right tree. You might startle that turkey, or that's just not saying you're going to spook him, but that's not really naturally what he hears when hens come to him. Hens are always giving some sort of sound, however hardly audible it is. It's probably not that realistic for what he's normally used to. So if you look at the other illustration, would be kind of how I would approach it, would kind of come around at a different maybe angle, maybe a little bit deeper off the road as I'm approaching, using that topo line to break up, obscure the vision. I'll start off real loud. I'll call at 400, at 300, at 200, at 100. So I'm constantly checking that turkey. I'm not being as loud at 200 as I was at 500, 400, 300. When I get to 200, I'm kind of calling a little bit softer, but I'm doing other realistic noises like purring and clucking, scratching the leaves a little bit as I'm moving around. Specifically on pressure turkeys, that seems to really work for me a lot. It could have to do with locating turkeys, calling, ability to crow call or owl hoot in a manner that would strike a turkey. Some people, they use, I wouldn't use a hoot tube. I don't think that's very realistic of a sound, but if you can get like an owl hooter actually, that you use compressed air out of your lungs, just like when you're turkey calling, that's something you can laugh with. Crow calling, not many realistic crow calls probably out there unless you go the custom route, but there again, compressed air. You're just trying to get a short burst of air, a few short notes, not to carry on a long sequence. You're just trying to grab a gobble out of that turkey. So one guy can do those things. He's going to have the ability to strike more turkeys than somebody that doesn't know how to operate that stuff. Me personally, I like to crow call. I use my natural voice, so I'll do that, show you kind of how that is. That's basically your uvula in the back of your throat. I throw compressed air from my lungs just like I'm running a mouth diaphragm, and very short burst of air, and I'm cutting it off with the top of, like with my throat. So short burst of air, Owl hooting, my owl hoot's not the best, but it's all deep down from your gut. It's from your lungs and your diaphragm. It's not just blowing air. It's got to come from down here. My owl hoot is normally, typically what I do is, you know, it'll sound like, there again, my owl hoot's pretty horrible, but that's kind of your, you know, squawking, laughing, stuff like that. If I'm trying to strike a turkey, I'm not going to do a bunch of long sequences with crow calling. It might be, that's it. I'm listening. Same thing with striking turkeys on a mouth call. It's and I'm listening. I'm trying to cut to that turkey and then I'm listening. Same kind of a way a hen does. Owl hooting, I might just throw out a roll my tongue and then listen. Do that a few times and I don't get a response, I might then go into maybe a laugh, something like that. Pardon the facial expression, but it's kind of necessary to get those sounds. There again, you don't have to be the best. I'm definitely not the best natural voice or whatever locator caller, but that seems to work for me. If you can just get the general principles and cut it off, your chances to strike a turkey are a lot better. But we've covered calling and painting the picture pretty well, I feel like. So we'll go ahead and go into the next category, which would be the ability to find turkeys. So knowing kind of what to look for. I like to be effective with my time when I'm trying to find turkeys. Covering swamps, river access by boat's a big one that I like to do. This next one, running ridges. It's basically the starting point up top and then working those ridges out. Calling, it's going to be a lot more effective than going down in bottoms and back up the top, then back down. Long roads, stuff like that, something I can cover a lot of ground. Typically, I'm not going to walk back the same way I walked out or walked in if I can help it, but not always. I've already kind of discussed climbing trees in hill country or flat land, and it really boils down to the amount of time and effort and miles you're going to put. Either that's gas in your truck and road miles or miles on your boots, really. So we'll go into the next slide here. Ability to find turkeys. Onyx Hunt app's very useful. There's some other mapping apps out there, I believe. Google Maps, I mean, no secret. There's lots of different apps out there. Right there, I'm looking for habitat types that are conducive to good turkey habitat. Turkeys are just like kind of white-tailed deer. They're edge animals. I'm looking for creek systems that come together. I'm looking for river systems. I'm looking for different stage clear cuts or cutovers. I'm looking for thin trees on one side, clear cut on the other, open hardwood, drains, agriculture, open fields, stuff of that nature is definitely what you want to kind of look for. The ability to cover ground efficiently and effectively and just find turkeys. People that get burned out, they're not persistent. They kind of lose hope because they've spent a lot of time, they've walked a good bit, and they just aren't finding turkeys. The difference is the people that'll just put that extra effort and go that extra mile, because you just never know when you're going to get some sort of break there. So I think that's very important. Things that are very useful, a kayak, like right here. I've got a basket up front that's actually ordered online that's a lot longer. My vest fits in there. Bow holder to the left there. Trolling motor with a lithium battery. I can drag this thing all through the woods. Skid guards on the front and the back. That allows me to access turkeys that probably most people wouldn't. Hip boots help. You know, some people aren't going to get wet for a turkey. Some people don't care. They're glad to get wet. I like to be dry and comfortable, so most of the time I'm going to be wearing some hip boots if I'm planning on encountering some of that terrain. On the flip side of that, some lightweight Danner boots, or a lot of people use Irish Setter or Crispies, or there's a bunch of different brands. Russell moccasin, Russell boots. I think there's a lot of good lightweight hunting boots that'll just give you the comfort to go that extra mile and walk a little bit longer distances than you probably wouldn't. Another one would be a boat. Definitely going to be able to access a lot more turkeys with a boat. Another one would be a bike, whether that's a electronic or electric drive bike like a Rambo or a quiet cat or something like that, or if it's just a regular old Huffy that you got from Walmart when you were in, 10th grade. Any kind of mountain bike is fine. I've used some of that. It kind of boils down to understanding turkeys, really. Need to understand feeding habits, the daily patterns, where they typically may go. It could be where a turkey typically goes during certain weather conditions, whether it's windy, whether it's rainy. That can play a factor. Going back to the slide here, we've kind of already covered flock dynamics earlier, but that's basically the amount of, what's the pecking order look like? Is there a crap ton of jakes? That can have an impact on your hunt, puts you in a position to be successful as far as calling goes. So this next slide really boils down to this whole key factor here, which is woods time. So if you look at maybe the Georgia season is, I want to say there's 17 Saturdays and Sundays in the Georgia season. If you want to be a more proficient turkey hunter, it's just like anything. The more you practice it, the better that you're going to be through experience and trial and error and learning what works, what doesn't work, how you might need to adjust your strategy. Think more about your setup. The more time you put into calling is going to make you better. Time really says everything about all the factors that we've even discussed. It's all going to come back from time. You take a guy that hunts maybe 3 hours in the morning and it's too hot and he don't want to hunt in the evening. Even if he has the available time to hunt in the evening, he don't want to hunt in the evening because it's too hot. Well, then he's missing out on time. He could be learning something, is the way I kind of see it. Every available hour I have to hunt, I'm going to be in the woods because I know I can learn something the more time I put in. So if you look at 17 days at 4 hours of average hunting time, the average guy might get in a day, what's that? Look at the slide there, 68 hours, something like that. If I'm able to hunt all day from daylight to dark, that's roughly 13 hours. In 5 days, I've got the same amount of woods time in for that season as the guy that hunted the whole season. So I want to say there's 60 something days in a Georgia season, something like that. Somebody can correct me, I have to look at the dates. That's 12 seasons worth of hunting that you could get up in experience as opposed to the next guy. Now, can everybody hunt every day? Obviously not, but just the point is to get as much time as you can in the turkey season. And that's pretty much, for the most part, it, guys. If you have any questions, if you think I hadn't covered something, this is just something I put together for the last this is my 26th turkey season. I have failed a lot. I've learned a lot. There again, I hunted traditional approach for 20 years. Because that's primarily the strategies and the style of hunting I've covered in this seminar / slideshow, whatever you want to call it. And I think highlighted how to do it maybe a little bit different if you want a little bit more of a challenge as far as killing one with a bow and arrow. There's definitely different ways to turkey hunt, and but this video pretty much encompassed kind of how you go about different situations with both different styles. And I hope it helps you out this spring. Y'all send me some questions, drop comments down below if you have anything that you'd like to mention that I could cover in the future. We may do some more videos like this on strategies, might go out there in the woods and kind of illustrate in the woods these situations. I try to do that in my videos and try to point out different things that might help you more. Hope y'all have a great spring and God bless.